Assalamualaikum. My name is Dr. Rida Shehram Sarwar, and our quote for today is: "Nothing in the world is ever completely wrong. Even a stopped clock is right twice a day." My topic for today is demographic dividend and its stages, and my name is Dr. Rida Shehram Sarwar. The learning outline is introduction, definition of a demographic dividend, its stages and implications, and the outcome is that at the end of the presentation, participants will be able to define the demographic dividend, its stages, the effect of education, health, and employment, which are the keys to understanding demographic dividend. First of all, what is demographic dividend? This is also known as the demographic bonus, which refers to an economic growth that results from a significant increase in the skilled working age population, which is between the ages of 15 to 64. These changes are due to people living longer lives and having smaller families, with a growing skilled youth population that fill the labor force and a smaller population that is dependent on it. A time-limited window of opportunity that is created for economic growth and family well-being. Pakistan has some of the greatest demographic opportunities for the development of the world as the growing youth population enters adulthood. The demographic dividend can only be achieved with adequate investments in education and skills of youth, harvesting the fruits of long-term human capital development. It basically is a growth in an economy that results from a change in the age structure of a country's population. The change in age structure is typically brought about by a decline in the fertility and the mortality rates. This is basically a graph of the population size and projections. As you can see, in 2010, there is a steep increase in the age groups of 15 to 64, which is going to contribute to the demographic dividend. Education, health, employment are the keys to realizing a demographic dividend. Improved health, especially for adolescents, young people, and women, access to education and adequate employment opportunities are keys to realizing the demographic dividend. Pakistani population is currently growing at an unsustainable rate, which puts stress on the social and economic infrastructure. When the number of dependents grows faster than the capacity to support the population, health institutions, schools, and job opportunities deteriorate. People's potential is derailed by poor access to healthcare and education, gender inequalities, poverty disasters, child marriage, and early unintended pregnancies. Pakistan currently faces challenges in coverage and quality of healthcare, including inadequate sanitation, unsafe drinking water, lack of immunizations, and widespread prevalence of communicable diseases such as TB, hepatitis, and HIV. Education indicators in Pakistan are lagging behind many other countries with similar levels of per capita income. According to a recent study, Pakistan's educational system has failed to provide the basic infrastructure for quality and gender-balanced education, and the country's poor economic performance in recent years has had an adverse effect on realizing the expected gains. Without simultaneous investments in job creation, effective policy interventions, good governance, infrastructures, and a healthy business climate, Pakistan's progress will continue to be constrained. To open up a window of opportunity for the demographic dividend, Pakistan needs to reduce fertility and invest in the growing youth bulge entering the labor force. If the births begin to decline each year, the young dependent population will also decline. This frees up resources to invest in the health, education, and economic infrastructure of a country. The demographic dividend is basically divided into 4 parts. The first part is known as the preliminary stage. This is when the country is going to enter its stage 2 of demographic transition, in which there is an large increase in the number of children, the dependency ratio increases, and there's little or no change in elderly population life expectancy. Part 2 is basically when the window of opportunity opens, and the mechanisms of the situation are such that here the country is going to enter stage 3 of the demographic transition. Children decline as a proportion of the population. Dependency ratio is also going to decline. There's little or no change in the population of the elderly. Worker bulge appears country-wise, which basically follow pro-development policy, and these countries are going to move to create employment opportunities and pursue international export strategy. Part 3 is basically where the dividend period comes about. And this is basically what happens is that for a generation, the country rapidly grows and prospers. Workers support fewer dependents. And when the country's policies ensure ample employment, investment opportunities, and great consumption, the dividend period is going to be brought about. As you can see in the graph, that the working age population is basically has reached its peak at 2010. Part 4 is basically when this window is going to close, but the country has developed. And what happens is that after a generation of workers age and begin to retire, stage 4 of the demographic transition has entered. Dependency ratio climbs based mainly on elderly as the dividend ends, and the growth of economy slows down, but it continues. This is basically a graph of the ratio of working age to dependent population in different parts of the world, where you can see that there's East Asia, USA, Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Europe. And as you can see in East Asia, between the 2000 and 2020 bracket, you can see that there's the largest increase in the ratio of the working age to dependent population. While most countries have seen an improvement in child survival rates, birth rates remain high in most of these countries, particularly those that are less developed, as a result of which these countries rarely enjoy the economic benefit of demographic dividend. Demographic dividends are occurrences in a country that enjoy accelerated economic growths that stem from the decline in fertility and mortality rates. A country that experiences low birth rates in conjunction with low death rates receive an economic dividend or benefits from the increase in productivity of the working population that ensues. As fewer births are registered, the number of young dependents grows smaller relative to the working population. With fewer people to support and more people in the labor force, an economy's resources are freed up and invested in other areas to accelerate a country's economic development and future the prosperity of its populace. To receive a demographic dividend, a country must go through this demographic transition, where it switches from a largely agrarian economy with high fertility and mortality rates to an urban industrial society characterized by low fertility and mortality rates. In the initial stages of this transition, fertility rates fall, leading to a labor force that is temporarily growing faster than the population dependent on it. All else being equal, per capita income grows more rapidly this time too. This economic benefit is the first dividend received by a country that has gone through this demographic transition, and a decline in fertility and mortality rates boosts working population productivity, which leads to a demographic dividend. There are 4 areas where a country can basically find demographic dividends. These include number 1, savings, 2, labor supply, 3, human capital, and 3, which is economic growth or GDP. Savings. During the demographic period, personal savings grow and can be used to stimulate the economy. More workers are added to the labor force, including women and human capital. With fewer births, parents are able to allocate more resources per child, leading to better educational and health outcomes. GDP per capita is increased due to an increase in the dependency ratio. So the key takeaways from this is that the demographic dividend is economic growth brought on by a change in the structure of a country's population, usually a result of a fall in fertility and mortality rates. The demographic dividend comes as there is an increase in the working population's productivity, which boosts per capita income. The first period for demographic dividend can last 50 or more years, and the second can last indefinitely as an aging population invests in various investment vehicles. And the demographic dividend can be found within savings, labor supply, human capital, and economic growth. Developing countries go through these 3 stages, and the phase 1 of the demographic dividend, which allows for improved income, health, which reduces the infant mortality rate, and a baby boom arises. This increases the dependency ratio. Phase 2, where the baby boomers, once regarded as a population curse, are going to grow into a large army of income earners, thereby boosting the GDP. The dependency ratio also improves as there's more hands to earn and fewer mouths to feed. And this is the first demographic dividend, and examples include India, Australia, and Indonesia. With improved health, baby boomers expect to live longer and save large sums of money for Retirement, and this is the second demographic dividend with few examples of countries including Brazil, China, and USA. Phase 3 is when the dividend is going to start disappearing. A growing desire for small families means that the baby boom is followed by a baby bust. When the baby boomers begin to retire, the proportion of non-earning old people is going to rise sharply to reduce the income per head, and these examples include Japan, Germany, and Russia. The role of policymakers. The dividend period can only be considered as a window of opportunity rather than a guarantee of improved standards of living. Only when a country capitalizes on the resources and uses them effectively will the economy benefit. If the right policies are not in place, a demographic dividend can turn into a demographic disaster. These are my references. And now I'll start with the MCQs. So the first MCQ is the demographic dividend refers to the economic growth that results from a significant increase in the skilled population of what age group in a country? Age groups 10 to 45, 15 to 64, 40 to 65, or 30 to 55?
B.
Yes, it's B. Question 2 is that the change in age structure that contributes to the economic growth and demographic dividend is brought about by a decline in fertility and mortality rates, B, increase in fertility and mortality rates, C, increase in morbidity and mortality rates, and D, a decline in mortality and an increase in fertility rate.
A.
It's A. Question number 3, which stage or period of the demographic dividend can last 50 years or so? Stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4?
B.
C.
It's stage 1. Countries such as Japan, Russia, and Germany are in which phase of a country's development in which the dividend starts to disappear? Phase 1, 2, 3, or 4?
4.
It's phase 3, C. Demographic dividends can be found within which of the following? Elderly population, spending, economic decline, savings, higher dependence, higher births, C, education, health reforms, economic instability, or D, savings, labor supply, human capital, and economic growth. The answer is 5D. It's found in D. Question number 6. Which part of the demographic dividend does the country enter in stage 2 of the demographic transition where there's an increase in children and dependency ratio? Part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4?
A. B.
It's A. How is the demographic dividend viewed? Number 1, it is the share of the working age population over the share of non-working age population. And number 2, it's the fertility rate over the mortality rate. So option A is it's only 1, only 2, both 1 and 2, or none of the above.
A.
It's A. 31. Which of the following was the first country to experience growth due to a demographic index? USA, Japan, China, or Australia? It's 8B, Japan. Question number 9. Which is not included in the advantages of a demographic dividend? A, increased labor force, B, increased fiscal space, C, decrease in women's workforce, or D, increase in savings rate?
C.
Yes. C. What can be included in the causes of the